Hello. Hi, everybody. Happy Saturday. I hope you are having the best weekend so far. Can you hear me? Can you see me? Is everything good? It is so good to be back here on the It Gets Better channel. I feel like it's been entirely too long. Hi, Isla. Hi, Ria. Hi, Sulky. Welcome in, everybody. It's so good to see you. I've got my tea, and better yet, I have a good friend to hang with us today and have some cozy heart chats about all things. We're going to cover lots and lots of stuff today, and I'm really excited. So get your blanket, cozy up, get a tea, and get ready to join us. Hi, Umi. Happy Saturday. So without further ado, let me introduce our guest for today, who is somebody that I just met over the last couple of months, and has already very much enriched my own life. So I'm incredibly excited to introduce them to you and have a nice conversation today and kind of get the weekend off to a good start, which I think we all kind of need right now. So let me introduce you to my friend Tofi, and I will also let Tofi tell you a little bit about themselves. So let me switch over here. Hi, Tofi.
Hello, hello, how are you doing?
Before we go any further, I'd love to hear from folks. If you can hear Tofi well, just about as loud as me, audio is tricky. Audio is tricky, so, I want to make sure you can hear them okay.
Hi, Sulky. I was gonna type it out, but I was like, well, I can just.
Oh
hover
yeah,
here.
you can definitely chat with the chat. There we go. Awesome. So we can be heard and seen, which is amazing. So Tofi, why don't you just introduce yourself a little bit and maybe what you do on your own channel, and then we can sort of get into our chats.
Yeah. And hello, how are you, Ria? Hi, I'm Tofi. I am a non-binary, asexual Chinese variety streamer who does a lot of charity work, a lot of mutual aid fundraiser, things like that. And I play a variety of games, mostly focusing around Buff Tato, Rick Astley, and Shrek.
I love the Shrek.
I should have put a Shrek beanie on today. I kind of missed out on that, but it's okay.
Oh, I should have added it to the overlay or something for you.
That would have been really cute.
Tofi, call your community the swamp, right?
Yes.
And it's very appropriate because there's Shrek overlays and Shrek alerts and Shrek everywhere. It's an incredibly fun space. Hi, Jupiter. So good to see you. And Shiny Pen. Welcome in, everybody. I hope you've got something cozy to drink. What do you have to drink, Tofi?
Ooh, I've got a jasmine apple green tea from a place called Dryad Teas. They're like a D&D inspired tea website.
Excuse me.
Delicious. All of them are delicious. Dryad tea, amazing. 10/10, recommend. Yeah.
That sounds so good. I have a very basic lavender tea, so in comparison, I've been wanting to get more into tea, like try some like loose leaf tea. I have the stuff that I need to do it, but I'm kind of lazy with it, and I just get little tea bags. But I kind of want to go all out and make I want to go from just drinking tea in tea bags to actually starting a tea garden. I think I'm missing some steps in between.
I mean, I believe in you. I feel like that'd be really good. You're a plant person too,
right?
So
I know.
Well.
I'm gonna try at least with lavender because I feel like I had success growing lavender last year. But that sounds amazing. I need to get some recommendations from you for some tea, especially D&D inspired.
Yeah. Oh, it's amazing. Yeah.
You're actually you're starting to DM your first campaign. Is that true? Did I?
Yeah. It's not going to be a campaign because I do not have the spoons or brain for that because that's a lot of work, but I'm going to be doing a charity one shot sometime at the end of March. I'm not exactly sure when yet, but yeah, I'm very excited. Everyone in it is going to be queer or trans. So I'm very excited.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I'm seeing in the chat that my Pixel chat captions aren't working. Let me see if I can figure that out real quick.
Yeah, and I mean the nice thing at least is that the the stream ones are working for you, just not Pixel chats.
Yeah. So I'm so new to Pixel chat. Usually when I do collabs, Tofi sets up the Pixel chat for me. And I was like, I'm hosting this. Let me be the one to do it. Let me see if I can figure it out real quick why that might not be working.
Hopefully it's quick and easy. Sometimes the
is that working now? There you go. For some reason it went to stop. I don't know, maybe because I might have clicked off of the page, but it looks like it's working now. It should be good now. Thank you for letting us know. That's definitely something I would want to know. A tea garden sounds amazing. Yeah, I think it could be a fun challenge. So you're doing it for a charity campaign. Well, that's so fun. I just started getting into D&D, and I admire very much people who can create the scenarios and like run them and
Yes. Yeah, I've got a pal of mine who has been my forever DM for a good like 3 years now, and he's just like he just whips them out of nowhere. Like one week he'll just be like, "Yeah, I've got a new one shot for you that we're gonna do this week," and I'm like, "How do you have the brain?" It's a talent.
Amazing. Honestly, us talking about this right now, I'm like, maybe we need to get some It Gets Better D&D going on in this channel or something. That'd be kind of fun.
Would be really cool.
Jupiter, you think that's something you
Not to call anyone out.
get some ambassadors and affiliates together. That would be so fun. That would be so fun. So anyways, now that we've got our tea and we've got everything hopefully working, why don't we get into some meaty, hearty chats? Hi Vic, good to see you. So I wanted to talk to you, Tofi, in particular, because I think I've learned a lot from you just from becoming your friend. But one of the things that I've most enjoyed learning from you and being inspired by you with is the way that you create spaces that are safe and sometimes serious, but also incredibly joyful. You have like one of the most chaotic and warm and just there's no other word for it, joyful spaces that I hang out in. And so I thought today, especially with everything that's been going on this past week, it might be nice for us to talk a little bit about, you know, how to create that joy and why it's so important. And of course, you know, we'll get into the serious today because I want, more than anything, I want to offer you a platform to share your story because that's what It Gets Better is all about. And I've shared mine here, and it's a magical thing to do. But I want to touch on that because it's something that has been just one of the most amazing things about becoming friends with you is just being able to soak in that. So, why don't we start with an easy thing that is related to that? And like, why Shrek? What is it about the swamp?
I don't know. Like, I don't know what it is about Shrek, but it has been one of my favorite movies since I watched it. Like, I don't even know how long. Like, a quarter of my life. Oh. Quite a few years ago, and I don't know, I just fell in love with it. The whole journey that he went on to like figure out and the whole journey that Fiona especially went on, like figuring out like, oh, like wanting to be this like perfect picture princess that everyone wants her to be, right? And then at the end being like, no, I want to be a freaking ogre. Like, I don't know, I just feel like there's a lot of good uplifting stories in that, and like being who you want to be and not what like everyone else kind of wants you to be, along with the chaos of onions and dragon fighting and a dragon and a donkey falling in love, and like just a great overall hilarious story for kids and adults, because there's a lot of adult stories a lot of adult themes in there.
I was actually just talking about that the other day, how many shows are for kids but actually have like these really deep themes that I'm sure the kids probably aren't fully soaking in, but maybe at least a little they're getting there, you know?
Yeah.
I love that though. I think Fiona's journey is honestly like a pretty impactful one, like going from, you know, that idea of like what the perfect princess is and being scared and hiding those parts of her that didn't measure up to that, and then just full on embracing them. Like that is amazing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I loved it, at least.
I love it. I was actually watching HBO the other day and I saw Shrek listed under like movies for millennials, and I was like, are you what?
Oh. Oh my god.
Hi, Gnome. I was like, hello? Didn't it just come out like yesterday? Like, isn't that a new movie?
Yeah, and then I realized there's been like 3 more.
I know. I honestly don't know if I've seen them all. I need to make sure that I have, because I feel like I didn't see the last one.
I think that's pretty okay. The first one obviously is the best one. The second one has the best soundtrack. But I think after that, like, they're not bad movies, but like you've seen the major ones if you've seen the first two, in my humble opinion.
That's so funny. Oh my God. I watched the musical recently
Oh my
on
god. Yeah.
Netflix. And it was really great. It was really great.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's amazing that they've got it. It just makes me very happy inside.
Oh my goodness. Well, too bad we don't have any Shrek rep today. I should have put it on your screen. That
Mm,
wonderful green screen behind Tofi, by the way. Oh my gosh, there he is in all his glory.
that's given. There we go.
Oh, is
There
he
we go.
supposed to be Buddha there?
Yeah.
Oh my God, I love it.
Go to Shrek.
I love it so much. That green screen behind Tofi is used to create some really incredible Shrek scenes and things. So I love all the emotes, Shiny.
Oh my god, thank you.
So this is gonna be like the most professional segue you've ever heard. So thinking about like journey to accepting ourselves and stuff. I know I've talked to you quite a bit about like my own journey with, figuring out my gender and my pronouns and things, and I know you've had a similar one. So do you want to talk a little bit about your ongoing, in a lot of ways, journey to like figuring yourself out and your identity, and maybe we can also have a little chit chat about labels.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. So let's see. Oh god. I think so I started getting on Twitch more a year and a half ago when one of my best friends in the entire world started streaming. And
Amazing.
before that, yeah, and it's been really great. Like, it was lovely. And for a really long time I just didn't have like the time or the support, I feel, to really like figure out who I was, figure out my identity. And so whenever I started getting on Twitch more, I started finding myself in different like queer and trans spaces, and like being around all of those lovely folks and all of their like really amazing communities that were all like so uplifting, accepting, like very big on like talking about their identity and like experiences and things like that. I was just like, it just kind of like rung a bell in my brain, and I was like, oh, maybe I'm not a woman. Maybe I really hate these she/her pronouns. And so it's I think December of last year I went from she/her pronouns, identifying as a woman with she/her pronouns, to gender apathetic slash gender fluid, where I didn't really like care what kind of pronouns people used for me. It was pretty much just like I don't care how I'm perceived. I don't care what pronouns are used for me as long as you respect me. And that lasted, I think, for about like 3 months. Because the main thing was, unless like I was talking to trans people, I would only get she/her pronouns, and it started to feel really uncomfortable, and I was like, okay, let's think about this and figure out why I hate having these she/her pronouns. And then I went to they, he after that, with a focus on they, them. And then I've recently realized within the last like month or two, oh god, month or two or something like that, that I'm also comfy with most neo pronouns, but I like Z0 a lot too. And so now I'm at they, Z, he. Yeah, it's been really nice. It's been really nice.
I love that you sort of mentioned Twitch as a place that let you sort of start putting the time, like, because I think another thing I like about what you said is like the fact that like you didn't have the time or energy to think about it, because I think that is something that isn't talked about enough. Like, sometimes sitting and figuring out who you are takes a lot of energy, emotional energy. Just, it can be really, it's not something that everybody has the ability to do all the time right away. Like, I think people sometimes paint it as this like easy thing,
Mhm.
but it really takes a lot out of you. Sometimes it takes research, sometimes it takes stumbling on the right people, the right words, And it's definitely a journey. So I like that you mentioned that. And then I also like that you mentioned Twitch, because I think that your space does that, you know, in really, really beautiful ways. Offers a place, and this space too, It Gets Better Project, where you can kind of take that time to think about who you are, and maybe because it's with other people in like a shared queer trans space, it takes the load off a little bit. And there's something about being able to experiment with people who will just sort of hop right onto it, you know, like today my pronouns are this, tomorrow they might be different. And having people around you that are just like, oh yeah, totally, that's great, let me use them, is rare. But I think Twitch does that really well, especially when it's spaces that are hosted, like people like you, this space, all of the incredible ambassadors that hang out here. I think it's one of the most beautiful things that Twitch offers, in my opinion.
Yeah, I would definitely agree, because I know that like I don't find a lot of spaces in real life where that's talked about, accepted, you know, and so being online has really helped in that way, and I feel like has done a lot more. Like I don't know if I ever would have figured it out if it weren't for Twitch, you know? So it's really nice.
Totally. I think there's something, I think I mentioned this, I don't know if it was to you, but I was talking about recently how online offers almost like a really nice way to be able to test out those kinds of things like pronouns,
Oh, yeah.
because you can put it in, like, you know, I'm looking at our Discord chat right now, and like you have your pronouns in your name, like it's just there, like you don't have to like come out constantly and say it. It's just there for people to see. And then you can also like curate your space online in a way that is different, obviously, than real life. And I think that there's something really magical about the ability to sort of do that. And it's why online spaces, I think, are so vitally important for queer communities, because it's just, you get to just play with who you are and experiment and be accepted for it. And it's there's just less stress to it. Like I can imagine updating my family constantly on the very like you know, the winding journey that has been my identities, and that would be a whole saga, you know, whereas like updating you is as easy as a DM, and you're like, got it.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and it's been really nice. Like especially because like on Twitter too, I think one of my favorite things in online spaces, and especially on Twitter, is just whenever I see someone be like, "Hey, like I'm trying out this new name," or like, "Hey, I'm trying out these new pronouns. Can you like drop me a quick comment, that way I can know how I feel about them," and like everyone just goes ham. It makes me so happy. Like it gives me so much serotonin to see that, and I feel like it's a really nice way of really figuring out and like sitting with it and being, is it like, am I comfier like this? Like, do I like how I'm being referred to in these posts? Because a lot of the times you're not going to get that. At least, I mean, I shouldn't say a lot of the times. You might not be able to get that in other ways.
Yeah. Silly, thank you for the follow. Welcome in, and welcome in everybody that's just popping in. It's great to have you here. I think for me too, there's something about thinking about your label and your pronouns in the abstract. And then there's another feeling entirely with like hearing it echoed back at you. And like for one, it can be really affirming, right? Because you can have that moment where you're like, oh yeah, that feels great. I like that. That's much better. Or sometimes you can have the opposite feeling where you're like, ooh, nope, I don't like that at all. I'm going to go ahead and shift that.
Yeah.
And I actually remember like a couple months ago, I was testing out trying any pronouns. And in the abstract, that made sense to me because it made sense from like almost like a theoretical perspective of how I view my gender. but then you were one of the very few people who actually did use any pronouns. Like you switched it up, you used all of them. And it was from like those moments that I realized that he, him really didn't do it for me. And I don't think I would have ever had that realization if you didn't do that. And so there's something so nice about having people in your life who will actually like take to heart those changes and think about it with you, you know, and let you feel what it feels like to be referred to in particular ways.
Yeah. Oh, gee. I feel that on a very deep level. Because as I mentioned earlier, like whenever I did also go by any pronouns, because I was trying to figure life out, I was like, I don't even know. Like, just try them all. Let's see what sticks. Like, literally, no one would use anything besides she, her. They were like, oh, any pronouns? You look like a she, her to me. I'm just gonna use she, her, and that was it. And it was so frustrating. It was so frustrating. And having those moments where like really good friends and like trans people would be like, all right, like let's use anything but she, her, because that's what they're getting the entire time. Like really, really helped a lot because it's just, you know, it's because you're not gonna know unless someone else starts like using them for you. Like once you hear it for the first time, I kind of
Yeah.
felt the same way about my chosen name. Like whenever I heard someone actually say it for the first time, I was like, that's it. I was like, that's the one.
I love that. I definitely want to get into names because I also have experiences changing my names. But there's a great question in the chat that I think we should check in with. And that is a good reminder for folks in the chat. This is a very casual convo. Like I have things I want to cover with Tofi, but we're friends and we're all friends here. So like ask questions and we'll get to them. So Isla said, I was wondering whether pronouns have to relate to gender identity because I feel super comfortable with they, them, she, her pronouns, but I don't think that I'm non-binary. And I think that that's something like that I hear a lot, that people think pronouns equal gender identity. And I'm actually all for sort of like divorcing those two a bit. I don't know your feelings on it, Tofi, but I think, you know, I'm comfy with she, her pronouns. I definitely have been leaning towards they and them a lot more. But when I'm using she, her pronouns, does that make me any less non-binary? No. And, you know, I think that that's like a really important distinction for folks to realize, or, and I think it can also be really helpful in figuring out your own identity. And then I think another thing with pronouns and identity too, is that like, often you might not be in a space where you can feel comfortable or safe using they, them pronouns or neo pronouns or whatever. But does that make you any less non-binary or whatever? Not like, of course not. So I think for me, I think they're separate things, but I'd love to hear what you think, Tofi.
Yeah, I think I would definitely agree with that. So I mean, like, it's really what you want, because if you use she, they pronouns, but are comfortable identifying as a woman, then that's great. Like those are the labels that are comfy for you. Like I'm kind of the same way. Like even though I use he, him pronouns and I'm like comfortable with using them, I highly prefer they, them, and I don't necessarily like see myself as a man. I see myself more as non-binary, even though I am comfortable with he, him pronouns, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that that's true. That's you too, Jupiter. Yeah, I think it depends for sure. And I think another thing with pronouns is that like, just like they, like we've been talking this whole time about how they can shift and change. The rest of your labels can too, and honestly like should. I mean, I'm very much like, I don't know, maybe this is like the hokey part of me, but I'm very much like, we change on the daily, you know, like embrace change. But that's very much me. And I think I, you know, even in my own journey with like labeling my gender recently, for a long, long time, I just didn't label it. I knew that my gender was not cis, but I just felt like I didn't need to label it. And it actually wasn't until I started to have a greater presence online that I felt a push to do it. And I also, and this is something I'm dealing with myself, but I also feel like there was a push for me to start labeling it when I myself started to appear more cis, if that, like, does that make sense? That's not the best way of putting it, but like I just feel like I started growing out my hair, and like I started then to feel like, but wait, folks, like this is not the full picture, you know? And I've been, even in that journey, I've changed, gone back and forth, like with the actual labels that I've used to describe myself. I was using genderqueer. I still do like that, but then I've been using non-binary a bit more. And I feel like labels for me are just very imperfect. And so I try them until they stick. And when they stop feeling good is when I drop them. But I think it's so individual and depends on the person. I think labels can really bring you a lot. But for me, I stop liking them when I feel like they're putting me in a box too harshly, or when I start feeling like I'm not measuring up to the label in a way, if that makes sense. What are your thoughts on it, Tofi?
Yeah. Oh gosh, what could I add to that? I think that was great. And I feel like, a lot of it has to do too with like online spaces on Twitter. Like, I feel like there's a lot of like, where is my brain going with this? Oh no. Like, I feel like we see a lot of people like online who like just know, right? Like, and the thing is, I feel like whenever I started looking into things and trying to figure out both my sexuality as well as my gender identity, whenever I like would Google things or like try to find people, a lot of what I saw was like, I knew from a really young age, like I knew I was trans from a really young age, or like I knew I was like gay from a really young age, and like I didn't know that from a really young age. And so it just, I feel like I really love that people are talking more about their journey, and like knowing that it doesn't, like, you don't always know right off the bat, and it's also continually changing, right? Like, next year I might really hate he him pronouns and take that off. like we're still learning about ourselves. We're like still constantly growing and figuring out what we are comfortable with, like how we want to identify as. And yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that was beautifully said. I don't know if this is like the queer theorist in me, but like I blame Lady Gaga. Like, I get the push, right? To be like, I was born this way. I can't change it, because when you are dealing with folks who are discounting your identity, not understanding your identity, it can be really easy to be like, I can't change it. I was born this way, and like have it be that. But I actually think that makes it so that your identity becomes this static thing that is a part of you that doesn't get to shift as you do. And that's not been my experience. I describe myself as a lesbian. I imagine that will stay the same my whole life, but who knows, And I think I have found over time that it's those labels that I feel like I have to cling to either feel valid or maintain community or defend myself, that those are the ones that start to feel heavy on me. Whereas like labels that I get to adopt and I get to change and shift feel a lot better. Plus there's this like, there are new words being like discovered for how to describe ourselves literally daily. And if if we are over here just like choosing one and sticking with it, we don't get to try those out. Right? I don't know. But I think, it's a tricky thing, because I think also it's sort of like, even though I'm over here saying like I'm trying all these different labels and stuff, does that mean my core self and identity is shifting dramatically every day? Not really. It's just that language is so imperfect. So it can be a tricky thing to explain, I think, which is where probably the born this way thing comes from. I love Lady Gaga too, but like, I was
Oh
born
my
this way and then
god.
shifted multiple times throughout my life is a lot better.
Yeah. It's a never-ending journey. Sometimes people will end it and be like, this is where I'm at, this is what I like. But for some people it's just never ending, and that's okay too.
Nova, thank you so much for the 5 gifted subs to the community. I see some fellow ambassadors and affiliates being gifted subs. So thank you for that. I appreciate you. Are the alerts sounding funky to anyone else? Because for me, they sound like. They don't sound like nice little noises, but I don't know if it's me. Can you hear them, Tofi?
I can't.
They
So I'm
sound
just like, ah.
they sound they sound a little bit like Shrek, to be honest. It sounded
Twitch bots
fine.
new. Yeah,
Okay, it's probably my audio. It's probably my audio. I'm glad it's good for you all. That's so funny.
Oh
But
my god.
honestly, ever since I sort of came out, I guess, as non-binary recently, I've had so many people ask me, questions about whether or not they deserve, and this is often the word that they use, so it's not me saying this. It's like whether or not they deserve or have access to certain labels for themselves. And I think that is a conversation that I want to go away. I want that to go away because it's rooted in so much, I've got the word gatekeeping on the mind. So Elden Ring just came out. It's all that I'm thinking about. But like it's gatekeepy, like it's rooted in this gatekeeping idea that like you have to be a certain way to claim ownership of a label for yourself or an identity for yourself or even a pronoun for yourself. And I think that that's a flawed way of looking at it. And it keeps people from feeling a freedom of exploration that really has enriched my life so much. Being able to explore who I am, and I know you too. And I think, one thing too that like I love about labels, even though I'm very much that person that's like, about them, is that sometimes there's like an innate draw to a person because of how they label themselves. Like Tofi, you being so brave, and that the word is brave because, as much as we talk about cheerful, joyful, loving queer spaces, there are plenty of people out here on Twitch who don't have good intentions. Just a couple of months ago, we had all of those hate raids. And so you being so brave with putting out there the labels you use to define yourself, and, shifting that from time to time is something that drew me to you as this is a safe human, this is a human that I can spend time with and that I can learn from. Like it's definitely a call out to others to be like, hey, like, you're safe here. Do you agree with that? Do you feel that way too?
Oh yeah, and I feel like that's definitely why I try to be so visible about it, because unfortunately, like even just like even being a non-binary trans person, like it's like a lot of LGBTQ spaces aren't kind to us, and so I really like making sure that I've got that kind of plastered everywhere to make sure that people like 1000% know, like, when you come into my space, you're gonna be happy, like, or well, I don't know, maybe about happy, because you're gonna see a lot of Shrek and butthole talk, so maybe not that, but like at least you're gonna be respected as an individual and like validated in your heckin' identity, and also like as someone who didn't really see a lot of that growing up. So I'm like Chinese, I'm Chinese as well, like who just doesn't see representation in like being Chinese or like a trans person or like the intersection between the two. I think it's really, really important to see that is like that there are people out there who are that, because I don't know, I didn't see a lot of queer people when I was growing up, a lot of trans people when I was growing up. I grew up in a like very military home. And so finding other people immediately makes me feel more safe. Like going into a POC space or a trans space or a queer space, like immediately makes me feel more safe than like going into other spaces, because I have like that little inkling of like, oh, like we can at least connect on something and they might like understand, you know?
Yeah, no, I think representation in that way is huge. And you're completely right in saying that, like, often I think non-binary identities are sort of left out of the conversation a lot. I want to talk to you about actually your recent. You were really vocal recently in some Twitter dialogue. I want to talk about that, but I think I saw people saying there was a good question in the chat. I don't know if you've experienced that, but for me, I have had my coming out queer experiences being invalidated by people close to you. How do you, as a fully grown adult, debatable, journey through those barriers? Yeah, you know what? We can definitely chat about that. Let me make a note to get back though to the recent activism that you've been doing, Tofi, because it's important. So actually on our list to talk about today is coming out, so it's a good segue, Ria, you did for us. I think so. Tofi, I'm gonna let you start because I feel like I've been chatty, but like, let us know, what do you think about like the idea of coming out, and how do you feel about it as a fully grown adult?
Listen, my stream is Shrek themed, so I don't know if we can call it adult, but we're trying. Um, but oh geez, I feel like I could talk for hours on this. I am very big. Like I love when people are able to be out and vocal to everyone, right? But in my in my life, I am not out to most people. So I think it's really important, like, knowing that you don't have to be out with everyone in your life, because it could be worse off if they knew, right? And so I have just recently started coming out at work more, asking for them to use they them pronouns more for me, and people obviously still get it wrong because I work with primarily cis white people in data. And that is largely it's largely a white male-based field, unfortunately. And so like it's not easy, I'm not gonna lie. Like it's not easy. I've got my pronouns plastered everywhere, right? Like I literally have them in like our profile page, I've got them like on our WebEx meetings when I can, I've got them like listed in my email signature, like everywhere. But some people just still don't. And so I think it can be really difficult in navigating how to go about that, because I think there's a large, like, especially when there's like a large power dynamic too, right? Like I am not the supervisor in a lot of my projects, like I'm a programmer, and so it is a lot of the time, because I don't want to come off in a certain way, I tend to just let it pass. And that's like a personal thing, because I want to make sure I have a job that I can pay my rent with, unfortunately. Um, I think it can be really difficult in navigating how to do that. And a lot of the times I do just kind of let it pass, because it takes more emotional effort trying to explain to them why they should be fixing their view of me and changing their pronouns up, than to me just like he or she, her every once in a while for them, especially if I don't talk to them a lot, which is probably a really controversial opinion, but unfortunately it's one I've got to make sure that I still have a job and can pay rent.
I think that that's a really good point. Well, you made quite a few good points, but there is like specifically this idea of like the workplace, and not just the workplace, but all of our spaces that we navigate, and sort of like choosing our battles, because they are battles and they do hold risks. One of my favorite thinkers is this person, Sarah Ahmed, and they say this quote: "When you expose a problem, you pose a problem." I'm sure you've felt that. Like when you are the one being vocal about a problem in the workplace, or in general, like anytime you bring up something that isn't going quite right in a system or in a scenario, often it is put on you, the person who is bringing up the problem, as the problem, and it's incredibly unfair
Yeah.
and not true, but that's kind of how it's made to be. And so every time you know, bring up the fact that, like, you know, maybe the workplace could be a little bit safer or inclusive, or stand up for your pronouns or things, it makes you seem like a problem. And like, and I think choosing whether or not to have that battle on a daily basis or a moment to moment basis is incredibly valid. Incredibly valid and also necessary. We can't all be fighting those battles every moment that we are alive. And I think one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you about joy today is to sort of emphasize the fact that that's not actually our job. Like, as queer people, as trans people, as non-binary people, we're not put on this earth to fight all of these battles and make things better. Some of us do that, and Tofi, you definitely do that. You definitely put a lot of your energy into activism and making spaces safer and fighting those battles, but like, that's not actually like your job. Like, you do get to just be like a happy, joyful person, and that is totally okay, and you don't have to like validate your identity by fighting those fights all of the time. And I know I'm telling you things that you know, but it could be there are people here right now that don't know that, you know. It is emotionally taxing. It is emotionally taxing. And I think, you know, a lot of times people don't realize that when you're coming out, it's not like a one-time thing. You come out, right? How many? I think I come out at this point like 10 times a day, right? Like, and different parts of me also have to come out, you know? There's parts of me that I'm more comfortable being super overt with, and some parts of me that it does take more emotional energy to be frank about. So there's that. And then I also think, touching a little bit on Rhea, what you were mentioning, a lot, I don't know if you feel this way, Tofi, but I feel like a lot of the invalidating of my identity is not always done by like the cis hetero people in my life. Sometimes it is my fellow LGBTQ people who are invalidating my identity, and that stings harder often, and can sometimes be the part of me that then starts to think like, oh, maybe I don't actually have access to this label that I'm using. Or I think that can be the harder conversation that with myself is like when I get feedback that's invalidating from somebody who maybe should get it more and doesn't, that it hurts more. I don't know if you've had that experience, but I feel like everybody on the internet has had that experience.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it too is like, at least in like the trans and non-binary aspect, like I feel like because we are socialized to think in these very like mask presenting like men and then like femme presenting female kind of way, like woman kind of way, excuse me. Like I feel like for a lot of like non-binary people especially, like whenever they come out, like it's just like, oh, so when are you gonna start like HRT, you know, like when are you gonna start transitioning, right? And it's just like, well, like there's a lot of non-binary people and trans people who don't want to, like they're comfortable in their bodies, they just don't like the pronouns or like things like that. And so I think that also plays into it a lot as well, because we just haven't really deconstructed that idea that society has kind of been drilling into us since birth of the womb, like coming out, you know.
I think
an
there's
awful way to say that.
Just sliding on out. I think that there's, especially with non-binary identities, there is a pressure to be androgynous.
Oh my god, yeah.
And like my own like personal experiences with androgyny is something that's very wrapped up in also like fat phobia and Like there's like, I think even our cultural understanding of what is androgynous is deeply, deeply flawed. So
Oh yeah.
it's like, you know, why is that something that I have to pursue, especially if it's dangerous for me to pursue it? Because in the past, it has been dangerous for me to pursue that ideal. Not just from like a safety perspective from outside people, but like dangerous for myself because of the lengths that I went to get there. And so when people, I think, often like invalidate me because of how I present, I feel like there's like even more back there, because I'm like, I actually can't do androgyny right now. Actually, it's like not super safe for me to do it. So like, at least the way my warped brain understands it. So yeah, I think that that's like a whole other layer, you know?
Yeah. Oh, for sure, yeah. And especially on top of that, a lot of it is focused on like white androgyny too,
Yes.
right? So it's something that is continually and should continually be worked on.
Definitely, definitely, definitely. Yeah, Shiny. I think it takes a lot to like unlearn that, because it has been like, I can't think of a better way of saying it, but like hammered into our heads, like
Yeah.
that like white androgyny, thin androgyny is androgyny, and like it's just, that's not even true. But it's a problem. So yeah, I think that was a great question, Ria. Thank you for opening us up to that conversation on like coming out. Tofi, you mentioned your family, and before our conversation today, I talked to you about whether you were comfy talking about this. If that has changed, please let me know. But do you want to talk a little bit about like growing up, and like, or not even just growing up, but even more recently, like what it's like, you know, being out or not out to your family, and sort of like the pressures there as well?
Yeah, that's a great thing. Yeah, so I am definitely not out to my family in any aspect. Like we grew up in a very military home, around a lot, like we lived in red states for a while. We grew up in like around military folks, and a lot of very red, like we love Trump kind of views, right? And so and so because of that, I think that's also one of the main reasons why it took me so long to figure out my identity, because I just didn't have the support, and I knew I wasn't going to have that, along with the time and energy to really figure that out. And that is also something I've been like thinking a lot about lately, because I'm gonna try to get on T sometime this year. Like that is one of my like overall goals. And I know that's gonna start changing. Like that's gonna start changing a lot of things, including like voice, what I look like. And so it's been a very fun time trying to figure out how I'm gonna navigate that, because I don't talk to my family often. Like we're not very close, I think for obvious reasons. Like I talk to them maybe like 3 times a year or something like that. But I know that I'm going to look and sound different, and so I'm still trying to figure that out, y'all. I'm still trying really hard to figure out how to do that, because I think it's inevitable at this point whenever I do that and get top surgery and things like that. But yeah, it's been very fun.
Yeah, no, that's incredibly challenging. Those moments where like, in a lot of ways, we're sort of outed without really wanting to, you know, just because things about us are changing. I mean, one thing I've learned, Tofi, is that like, just because somebody is family doesn't mean that I need to keep them in my life. I don't know how much that applies to you, but like,
Oh yeah.
those pressures to, you know, keep in touch, if it's easier on you mentally to not, I would not, you know. But yeah, I feel for you on that. And if there's ever anything that I can do on that journey, you have an ear here. And any other kind of support that you might need, because there's also that, right? Not sometimes separation from family means real struggles, financial struggles, emotional struggles. So I feel you on that too. Thank you for being so open with us about that. Yeah, Umi. I mean, I love
Yeah.
that we have Stardew Valley music on the background. This is just like my like generic like copyright free playlist, and it
Oh my
feels
god.
fitting to me that there's like some chill Stardew music behind us.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like, I think that there's often a pressure for us to just keep people in our life because they are
Mhm.
family, whether that is blood or, you know, any other kind of family. And it's not always a service to us, you know. But it's also complicated. That's, you know, there are people in my life right now who shouldn't be. If I followed my own like advice that I always give to people,
Yeah.
there are people who, there are family members who are chilling in my life right now who really shouldn't be. Um, and it's because there's, you know, memories of them and ties to them that make it harder to keep that distance. So I feel you, Tofi, on that. Hi, Nicole. Good to see you. Hi, Ryu. Did I say that correctly? Hopefully I did. B. I came out as a lesbian last year after living a straight presenting life because of my homophobic family. Labels now are so important to me because they weren't available when I grew up. Being a non binary lesbian has been so freeing. B. I use that same descriptor and I have absolutely loved it. In part because it feels like an anomaly, you know, right? Because the word lesbian is very wrapped up in like in gender in ways that I don't think it necessarily should be. But so I feel you on that, B, and I love that you shared that with us. Thank you so much for sharing. And I also feel that like wanting to cling on to labels because you didn't have access to them in the past. Do you feel that too, Tofi? Like,
Oh
do you
yeah.
feel like an attachment to some?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Because I feel like once you like find a label where you're like comfy with it, like even if it does change in the future, like it's a big moment. Like finally realizing I was asexual was like a big moment because I was like, oh my god, that makes sense. Like this feels so like oh my god, you know. And so like I don't know, I feel that 1,000%. Yeah.
And I think it also like for me the thing that labels does so beautifully, and like honestly for me, if this wasn't a part of them, I think I wouldn't care about them. It's the access to community. It's the access to
Oh my god,
people
yeah.
who are like you know. And Twitch adding identity tags has made that so much easier. There's room for more there, but like
Oh yeah. I could go on a rant right now about that.
but like, you know, the ability to log on to Twitch and put in non-binary and put in lesbian and then maybe an identity that isn't me but I want to learn more about or whatever, and instantly be paired with people like that is such a magnificent thing. And for me, and lesbian is this label. It's like one of the first labels I gave to myself. And it was like one of my first forays into queerness and queer people. And I, you know, like you, Tofi, I grew up in a place that is very red, very close-minded, just outside of a very, very open place, New York City. But you leave New York City in New York, it's not the same. I feel like people who don't live in New York don't understand that. Like they hear I grew up in New York and they're like, oh, it must have been like a wonderful place to grow up. But no. And so like it really was when I started using that word on the internet, that I like found people like me. And for that reason, I don't think I could ever not use that word for myself. Even if over time I did evolve to change it a bit, I think it would just be something I held close just for the memories, you know, and just for like the good associations. So I feel that. Thank you for sharing that, B, so much. So do you have any advice, Tofi? I know this is something you're still very much navigating, but do you have any advice maybe for folks who are listening today or in the future, for dealing with family/communities that aren't understanding of you? You know, so that say somebody's listening right now and they're in that same situation and they can't be out. What might you say to them?
Oh Yeah. Um, yeah, I feel like that's always really tricky. I think the main thing for me that has helped is knowing that my online spaces are accepting and validating. And so, a big thing for that, especially like around holidays, because holidays are freaking awful, because I get misgendered and dead named all the time, because my family, right? And so, like, for folks in that kind of situation, like, just knowing that no matter how much that's going to happen around people you can't be out to, like knowing that you've got communities that are there for you, like that are accepting, that are validating, um and having the time and space after to like decompress and like like make time to get into those spaces afterwards to make sure that you feel better after a day or a week or however long it is, of just not good times. Like purposely putting myself into spaces where people are going to gender me correctly and use my right name and things like that is so important, especially after being around family members who aren't, you know?
Yeah, I think that that's exactly it. Having places to go and escape into that are completely radically different from what you're going through on the outside, and where you can be validated in who you are. I think I also used to practice boundary setting in ways that were safe. So it might not have been safe for me to like completely correct people in like their assumptions of me or how they treated me, but it was relatively safe for me to put limits on how long I would spend with them, let them know that I would need to escape into my room at some point. You know, who I told the specifics would vary, but sometimes realizing that there are boundaries that you can set that aren't always correcting misgenders or whatever else is happening in your life or in your family, but finding ways that you can just sort of ease yourself into those situations can be really helpful. And I used to just spend a lot of time in my room with the door closed. On the internet,
Scrolling Tumblr, you know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I don't want to cut my family off, but I feel like I'm a sliver of myself around them. And I think,
Yeah.
I think that that's a valid way of doing it. You know, for me, and I think Tofi for you too, there's stuff with family and like less just them not understanding, but also like a sense of safety, like physical safety sometimes. And for me, that was like they needed to be gone, you know. But I think when you don't have that layer, however you decide to do it, whatever feels good for you is valid, you know.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah. I feel like something I should say is that goes for like friends too. I know that there's a lot of like friends who I have stopped really hanging out with as much and like stopped hanging out in their space because they continually misgendered me like time and time again after I told them, you know, or like I heard them misgendering other people. Even though I've like corrected them a couple times. Like I think that knowing that like weaning people off, even if you don't think you can do it like 1,000%, like just immediate cutoff, just knowing that you can stop spending as much time with them for those boundaries, you know?
Do you feel like that's something that isn't really talked about a lot? Like, I feel like a lot of people I know who are non-binary or queer, they don't necessarily have that pool of childhood friends they've always had.
Yeah.
And I used to feel so isolated in that. I used to think it was like a sign that there was something wrong with me, that I couldn't maintain long-term friendships. And then I realized that it wasn't my fault. Like, it's not my fault that I had to cut people out of my life, like it's
Yeah.
entirely their fault, but it feels sometimes like your fault, like,
Oh my God, yeah. No, what an absolute mood. I think also coming from a military background where we like moved
oh
every three
yeah.
years, I think that a lot ties into it too, because I don't really have like any friends from childhood because We literally just left every 3 years. But like I definitely think that's super super important. I think that's super super important to note. And like knowing that it's not your fault, like if because if they were better and they actually like accepted you and validated you like you needed them to, like they'd still be in your life, so it's on them. No matter how much it feels like it's your fault, like it's theirs, you know.
Yeah. I mean, like, talk about representation. I feel like you see so many, like, this is a silly thing in the grand scheme of things, but like, you see so many movies of like old friends getting together and like, you know,
Yeah.
big weddings, you know, and I just like, I always used to feel like, what did I do so wrong? Like, what did I do so
Yeah.
wrong that I don't have that? And I, you know, it's really recently that I realized it's because they didn't deserve me.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like once you have that mindset, you're finally like, oh my god, like this is self-care, isn't it?
I've always told myself that I wasn't good at keeping friends long term.
Oh,
So thanks for saying that. No, Umi. I mean, Umi, I feel like I've only just recently met you through Tofi, but like I can already tell that there's you're delightful at making friends and community. It's not you. It's not you. But I do think it's not talked about. Like I think a lot of like queer communities don't necessarily discuss the fact that they don't have long-term friendships. And there we go right back to the beauty of Twitch, the beauty of online spaces, these communities that we can have where we can develop relationships that we just don't maybe have access to outside of it, you know? And I mean, I think that brings us back to this idea, right, of building safe and inclusive spaces online. And that's why Tofi is here, because Tofi does that, right? Tofi, I wanted to go back to some of the activism that you've been doing recently, specifically for non-binary folks, because you were vocal recently with the Game Hers situation. For those that don't know, Game Hers is an organization meant to uplift. They were saying women and non-binary folks in gaming and streaming, but they were not actually being inclusive and opening to non-binary people, specifically also like more masculine presenting non-binary folks, and they weren't doing that in their language, and so it was kind of like a do we belong here scenario for a lot of folks, and Tofi, you were pretty vocal about that, and you actually you made some substantial changes, so I wanted to see if you wanted to chat about that at all.
yeah, no, that's a great thing to bring up, yeah, because I feel like it's very important and very very unfortunate. Because I just feel like so many times a lot of non-binary folks, especially like femme-presenting but non-binary folks, or people who view non-binary folks like as women, like they get lumped into a lot of women's spaces, and we see that in a lot of like awards and like especially like broadcast her stuff and a lot of other like there was a podcasting thing who was all about women and non-binary people too, but all women, you know. And so the thing with Game Hers was like it's something that's kind of spawned from Kamianya, who had been doing some activism about it too, and like asking questions, because they actually like had downloaded the app because they use they them pronouns, they identify as non-binary, and they were like, oh hey, this is a really cool thing for like marginalized folks in the gaming industry, specifically women and non-binary folks, which is super super important, because like there needs to be space for them in a mainly like male dominated area. And so like they had downloaded the app, like gone through it, and felt like just like really uncomfortable with the entire thing, because it was all geared around, look at these lovely women, like look at these women doing things, look at these women, like every communications that there was all over the website, it was all about look at these women. But then in like ambassador posts and other kind of posts, they were like, yeah, non-binary people are included in this too, and it was just really frustrating because it was again like lumping in non-binary folks, specifically femme-presenting non-binary folks, into this idea of like, oh, they're really women, like they're obviously not non-binary, like they're women, you know. And so we had a lot of comments about it, and I don't know why my post blew up because a lot of people were making posts, but I guess the timing was just right on it. I feel like as Twitter works somehow.
Couldn't have anything to do with your eloquence. Couldn't have anything to do with that.
Not at all, not at all. Look, but there was a case where like I spoke up about it, and one of the people in the Game Hers apps, like who was thought to be just an ambassador from what their outward-facing Twitter profile was saying, but actually when someone looked at their LinkedIn account, they actually worked for them, was continually talking over me in the comments, saying, no, like they're really inclusive, like this is a place for non-binary folks too. And whenever like we would be like, hey, but you're not being inclusive in your language, like it's just saying woman everywhere, like her, woman, look at these women, like look at how great they, like look at how great these women are, like continually just kept talking over us, being like, oh, like I have a non-binary sibling, so I know what I'm talking about, you know, kind of weaponizing their non-binary sibling, which feels really gross. Kind of doing that kind of stuff. And eventually they stopped and then DM'd me specifically to say the same exact things, talking over me again. And it was just a mess. But the Game Hers folks actually reached out to Kamiyanya and I to talk through what happened, figure out how they can be better, because they obviously need changes to happen. And we met, I think, sometime the end of January now. Like, we ended up meeting sometime at the end of January now, because they wanted to understand, like the CEO, like the person who founded it, wanted to understand what happened, because all those posts were gone, because the person ended up deleting their Twitter account, and so they didn't really know the full picture of everything. And so they ended up messaging us, reaching out. We had a meeting about it, and I haven't really spoken to them since then. I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful that changes will get made, but I think something that at least that company really needs to do, or like that organization really needs to do, is figure out if it's specifically going to be a women's space or not, you know, which I think is really important. Like it's not to say that these spaces aren't needed specifically for women, right? Like women need to be women need to be uplifted in that way. Like I think it's pretty obvious like that needs to happen. But a huge thing is like I feel like a lot of organizations tend to also just like slap non-binary on there and be like, all right, let's be inclusive, let's put non-binary people in there, but then not do anything to actually make it inclusive for non-binary folks. It's kind of like as a, let's sprinkle this in because we should.
I think it's like almost like a fear of being exclusive, you know?
Yeah.
And I think you're completely right. I think that there should be organizations that uplift women. But the problem becomes when they're trying to create a space that is inclusive to everyone without the tools to actually make it inclusive to everyone. And that,
because it's okay if they just make it a women's space. Like that is absolutely fine, you know?
Yeah. And you just, you know, then non-binary folks just don't join, and like
problem solved.
You know, but it's, you know, I think a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of people don't realize that there's a lot more that goes into making a safe space than calling it that. You know, like you would think that would be an understood thing, but it's actually not. You know, I think a lot of times people just sort of say like this is a safe space and don't actually do the work into like creating one that is safe and cultivating it and making the hard choices. And you know, here's another really great segue. You do that. You do that in your community. Do you want to talk a little bit about like the intent that you put into creating a space that is actually genuinely safe? Because I can say from experience that it is. So you're doing the right things. So what thought do you put into it? Have you ever had to make hard decisions? anything about that. I think I just missed a follower. Welcome in.
Oh gosh, yeah. Oh geez, yeah, that's a lot. I mean, I feel like from the get-go, whenever I first started streaming, like, like we don't know everything as humans, right? Like I feel like I'm constantly learning, I'm constantly like learning like new things and like new like phrases not to say, new words not to say, things like that. And like I have I have tried really hard from the get-go to really like have resources for folks that are still trying to learn, and especially for me too, because I don't know everything. My brain goes whenever people ask me questions, and so I try really hard to make sure that like especially for like pronouns and identity, like I've got resources for that way people have those available to them. And like especially with a lot of like the ableist language that people are talking about too, like we have recently in the swamp decided to in the swamp started to like try to remove those like the casual ableist like phrases and words that we say that are kind of really ingrained in our society, like really trying to work to like remove those as well to make sure that people feel comfortable in the chat. And it's difficult, like it's really difficult, especially because I am very passive. um I'm a very passive person, and I'm like not. I'm always. I'm never like. I'm learning how to be better at speaking up about things, and it's always really uncomfortable. Like even if it's not from their perspective, it's like really stressful and anxiety inducing to me. To like when someone says like crazy or something, for me to be like, hey, actually, don't say that because that's in like our list of ableist words, and like output like resources at like here's where you can learn more. That way you know why you shouldn't say it. But like every single time I do it, I have like a slight panic attack where I'm just like, what if they leave the swamp now? Which I mean, would be valid, would be fair, because then they probably don't need to be in my space, if they're not going to want to learn and grow. But like, it's still very stressful. And the same thing with all the Pepe emotes and stuff. Like, for the longest time, I had no idea anything behind Pepe, like, at all, like, literally until like 2 years ago, which is wild because I feel like it's happened for like it came out like a while ago. But like trying to slowly, because there are a lot of people like who still use those emotes, and especially like whenever I first started the community, like people would just like pop those in there, and like having to like go do the research as to why it's an issue and like get like articles and things like that. That way I could just be like, hey, like let me copy and paste this little message in there that's like explaining why you shouldn't use them. Like, and it's always really stressful because sometimes people don't listen, like sometimes like I definitely have a person or two who are just like, no, like I'm still gonna use them. And I'm like, well, you just aren't gonna come back to my space then. Like you could leave, like see yourself out. I'm so sorry, you're lovely, but like do better. Just, I don't know if that actually answered anything.
No, it did. I think it's great that you brought it up because I see that as one of the most important things that somebody can do to create a safe space is put themselves in the position of actually having to have those difficult conversations. First of all, think about like what is and isn't allowed in your space, and then do the very hard work of cultivating a community that accepts that, and often that does mean people leaving, and that often does mean difficult anxiety conversations. And I think it's one of the pillars to me of an actually genuinely safe space when the leader is willing to stand up and make those difficult choices, and you do that. And I think that that's a great example of creating a space that is safe. And then you also touched on another one that I just lost because I have a brain fog. Wait, it was there. Sometimes I do this thing where I'm in the middle of a conversation and just forget where I'm heading.
That's fair.
Do you happen to remember the first thing that you said? If not, we can move on. But it was a good one. Oh, I thought of it.
I was like, oh God, I don't remember.
I think modeling not knowing everything and being willing to learn is another thing that you said that I fully agree with. And I think it's actually contrary to what a lot of people think. I think a lot of people, I always feel, will often see me as somebody who has all the answers, knows how to be completely and perfectly inclusive, doesn't make mistakes. And like, that is so not true. And so I spend a lot of time trying to say like, hey, that's not true. There's a lot I don't know. I'm still learning every single day. I learn from you every single day, the people around me. And I think that that is another thing that is so important for a space, is being willing, number one, to acknowledge that you don't know everything and not balk when people say, hey, you got that wrong, you know? And in fact, like, thank them for the courage in that, because I think there's so much courage in speaking up. You were just saying how scary it is, even as the leader of your space, to say like, get out of here with those emotes, right? Like, imagine being a viewer of your space and having the courage to be like, what you just said is not right. You know, that's, I think, an incredible courage. So I think the two things that you said are spot on, and I share in them. Those are, to me, pillars of spaces that are safe. And then I think the other thing that you didn't mention, but you do, and I've been harping on this, but it's because it's so unique about you, is you create a space where you can simultaneously shift from having really deep and sometimes difficult conversations about things that are going on to buff-tato. Which, for those of you who've never been to the swamp, is Tofi's face on a very buff potato. Do you have a...
I do. Hold on. I'm pulling it up right now. I got you. Buff tato is my favorite.
There you go.
There we go.
There you go. Oh my gosh, please. We could have been having this the whole time.
I could stay like this the rest of the time if you'd like. Like, I've got no qualms about that.
And this, like, instantly just makes me laugh. And I know for a fact that it does that for everybody else watching you. And it's, you know, being able to share in genuine laughter with a community that is genuinely safe because of the efforts that you put into it is so special. That is so special. You know, I think that joy is so important, but joy in a space that you know from tested conversations is genuinely space is even more magical and even more important. And you do that expertly. I mean, look at it. Look at it, everybody.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Like, I just, you know, it's already a really stressful time being queer and trans online. You know? Oh god.
I love it so much. I love it so much. My favorite buff-tato moment is the scared and shocked buff-tato. I love it. But I mean, it's true. I mean, those of you who are hanging out in the chat right now, like, do you, like, what does it mean to you to have a space that juggles the realness with also like the laughter? Like, and I think that as a host, that is such a difficult balance, but is something very worth finding, because there's something so important about just being able to laugh with people who are like you know, and who respect you. And you also, you prove just how ridiculous it is to think that you need to have laughter at anyone else's expense too. You know, like, there is no like jokes that are about pronouns or jokes that are about identities, but yet there is still genuine laughter. And I think that, you know, that's so important too. So that is one of the things that drew me to your space instantly, the joy, the laughter. Now I want a plushie. Oh, you should make some buff-tato merch.
He's so cute. I really want to.
Oh, I love it. So let's go back a little bit to activism, because I realized I didn't get to ask you about this. But in addition to, like, you know, the Twitter activism, I feel like Twitter activism sounds not great, but you know what I mean. You've also been doing some equity inclusion work at the workplace. which I've done in the past, and is so important, but also very complicated and often challenging, and genuinely unpaid.
Oh yeah.
Do you want to talk a little bit about the work that you do? I know you have a resource group, and I feel
Yeah.
like it's real special work. So
Yeah, I really like it. So I have been involved in the trans inclusion subcommittee and the Pride like employee resource group for about 2 years out of the 3 years I've been at my company. And I recently stepped into position as like the lead of the trans inclusion subcommittee back in November. And I actually, as of last week, stepped into the position of lead in the Pride ERG. Um, Mainly due to people not having time. So no one else applied. But I think that also goes to show how little people, like little resources we get in that kind of vein. And like like I have really loved doing that kind of work. So we mainly for the Pride ERG do like a lot of community building kind of things. Like we do like happy hours and we do like Pride Month events. Like we brought in drag bingo last year, which was really fun. And we had a lot of talks about like health impacts of trans folks, like all company like health impacts for trans folks, and like bringing in people from different ERGs to talk about like the intersections of identity. And then for the trans inclusion committee, we do more in like pushing the company towards a better place, because they are, as I think a lot of companies like to say, devoted to DEI efforts, because they like the label but not actually doing the work. And so, and so a lot of the stuff that we do, really what we've done recently, is we've like created like guidelines for how you can like talk to supervisors and HR about whenever you're getting like misgendered at work. Like we created a whole document for that. That way, like trans folks feel safe in speaking up. We've also done a lot in like trans inclusive like communications, talking about like why they them is actually a valid pronoun to use in proposals and things like that, and to use for people in their pronouns. And it's unfortunate that we even have to do that. And we've also done a lot of work like looking into the benefits that we have and figuring out where we can make them more inclusive. Like so, for example, in a lot of the like health benefits that like companies usually tend to have, like it always says like he or she, or like whenever it looks at like parent and caregiving, it looked like it always says like the mother, like the pregnant mother can do things, like, or like the caretaking father, things like that. And so we do a lot of work looking into those, like digging around and changing the language, and benefits if we can sometimes too, if they need to be updated, to make sure that instead of mothers giving birth, it can be people who give birth, because not only women give birth and things like that. But like as you said, a lot of the time, like it's unpaid. We don't get a lot of hours for it, so we're like limited to the kinds of things we can do, the amount of people that we're allowed to bring on for these. We get very limited on how large of a project we're allowed to take on, and a lot of the times we have really small groups, because unfortunately people just don't have time because they're busy, and a lot of it's like either on their own time or like supervisors and other people in the company don't find it as valuable as being like billable, is what my company says, because we're very research and data analysis based, and we're like very like keen on like you have to be billable, you have to be doing project work, and DEI efforts in like any fashion just don't count as that. And so a lot of people tend to look down on that. So it's frustrating. But it's
yeah,
good work.
it's such a delicate balance, because I used to feel very fulfilled when I was doing that, but also recognized that it was labor that I was not compensated at all for. And the people who did it with me were all fellow like queer folks who were doing it out of the goodness of their heart, but because they wanted to make a better space. And I think that there's so much wrapped up in that, right? Like you said, it's not billable, it's looked down on. And I think I would love to see those kinds of things be more like weighed heavily in corporations and at workplaces. And if you are using the emotional labor of, you know, your marginalized employees, I would love to see that be more compensated, you know. But I think it's incredible work for you to be doing, and might also, like, maybe, who knows, lead you to a path where you could be doing some paid consultant work and stuff for that. But like, I think DEI in general in workplaces and in, you know, institutions, it needs an overhaul. It is so often on the backs of the people who aren't fitting in to the system and institution, and it is time for that to change. But you are doing incredible work there, and I know that you bring that same work to your streams because you have all of this knowledge that grows on a daily basis on, you know, things that you're learning through this, and it probably informs your space even more, right? So it's good work, but I do wish it was more validated work.
Yeah.
Do we have an equal opportunity division? Oh, are you like specifically where you work, Tofi, or in general?
Oh, yeah, good question. We don't have an equal opportunity division. I wish we did, to be a little spicy. Like the ERGs, a lot of us, because we don't have time, like a lot of us are just like a lot of the ERGs. We've got like the Pacific Islander ERG, Disability ERG, like Black ERG. Like there's a lot of ERGs that like push, that try to push the company I work at to a better place, right, and better to work at. And there are a lot of ERGs that are leaderless at the moment because they just aren't getting the time and people don't have the support, you know? And so I feel like I feel like it would just end up being the same for like some sort of equal opportunity division, like because these ERGs that are supposedly so important aren't even getting the funding and like resources they need. I don't. I wish an equal opportunity division was available. Like I feel like that'd be really nice, but like,
yeah.
Unfortunate.
It would take resources.
Yeah.
and valuing, you know, valuing that work at the same level as, like you said, the other stuff that the company does. But it's just another example of like we were talking about with coming out, it takes emotional labor to do it, and, you know, taking that time to actually like inform people around you and make changes is emotional labor. It is. I mean, especially when it's tied to your identity. Do you feel like the resource groups are usually led and like acted, like mained by people of those identities? Is that kind of how it operates? Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. Because unfortunately, a lot of the times, those are the only people that we can get to do the work. Because, you know, if it's not affecting you, why should you care? Unfortunately, it was a lot of the ideas that a lot of folks have. So yeah, which makes it even worse, which makes it harder.
It ends up being like a labor of passion kind of thing. Actually, that brings me to a thought. Like, in terms of allyship, I feel like this is a constant conversation, how to be a good and active ally. I find often with conversations with allies, they are afraid of doing the wrong thing, and so they do nothing. And I think a little bit about like your resource groups and what it would mean for somebody not affected to sort of step up and do that labor and start doing that research and be willing to maybe not have all the answers and not know completely well, but still put the energy into it. And so that makes me think of this idea of like allyship. And I think for me, an ally, of course, allies, well-meaning allies who spread misinformation is a problem, right? But I do think that there is something to being willing to make a mistake and own up to it and continuously learn that is needed in allies. Do you agree with that? Do you have any advice for allies who are listening today?
Oh, yeah, no, that's such a huge point. Because especially like I feel like a lot of allies who are trying to be well-meaning end up like overstepping and overspeaking a lot of folks, which is very problematic. Ari gamers. Um, and so yeah, I think that's really important. Also knowing that like as an ally, like Google is free. I don't mean to that to be shady, but like Google's free. Like you can find a lot of free information on Google. You don't always have to go to a trans person and be like, hey, like, what about this? Like, there's a lot of like online resources that you can go to learn more about like issues you want to learn about. Especially because for a lot of trans folks, like I feel like a lot of people will go to like a certain person of a marginalized identity and be like, oh, they're in this community, so like obviously they're gonna talk about this, right? Like obviously they don't mind if I ask questions, but like a lot of people don't have the emotional effort for that. Like sometimes we just want to exist. Sometimes we just kind of want to exist and not have to constantly think about all the kind of like crap that we're having to go through and fight for, you know? And so being able to find like good resources online is really, really great for allies.
Yeah. I also think I love this idea of like when to speak in addition to how to speak, So like definitely using the resources and energy that you have to do the research first and foremost. But also knowing that sometimes like the most important time to speak is when it's dangerous or a risk for the marginalized person to speak. And that is like a great time for you to like use your privilege as an ally and speak up. I think about recently I was in a meeting and there was some very overt sexism happening, and I was incredibly disappointed in my cis male colleagues who didn't use their privilege in that moment to be allies and sort of speak up and say like, hey, this shouldn't be in this presentation. This shouldn't be happening. You're making a space that is not safe for other people around you. And I found like that was like a prime moment where they could have stepped in and been allies, but didn't say anything. And I feel like that's a really good point that you bring up, Shiny, is like that when to speak. And that to me is like the moment, we talked a little bit about like the energy it takes to expose a problem, right? And how that often puts you in the position of like looking like the problem. An ally might not have that same response because they're not of that identity. And so them bringing up the problem is less about it being a personal issue and more about it being a structural issue. And so for an ally to speak up in that moment is sadly more meaningful often.
Yeah. Which sucks. But that's honestly true, unfortunately. So.
You should take a step to realize the privileges you have to not be affected, and when you understand that, learn how to utilize that privilege to uplift the affected community. Yeah. Which I listen, I get it can sometimes be really hard to recognize that when it's not a part of your daily life. And that to me is where listening to people who are different than you come in, bringing us right back to those Twitch tags, right? I love having at my fingertips the opportunity to sit back and listen and exist in perspectives that are completely different from mine. And I've learned so much just from that, just from being able to like, watch people who are completely different from me existing in their own joy, in their own communities, as a silent listener. There's something about that allows me to have access to like, oh wow, that's something I've never had to think about before. where, which is not easy to talk. It's not easy when you're just like living your life to think about the things that you don't need to think about, It's hard. Do you feel like there is anything else that, like, how do I want to say this? Do you think that there is something to this idea of like ignorance being a bad thing that makes it harder for allies to like want to speak up or learn or make mistakes in that? Because I feel that way. I feel like we have, as like a, I don't know, as a society, we have made it such a negative thing to be ignorant. And listen, it is, like there is a damage to ignorance. But I also feel like sometimes there is, it is such a scary thing that people don't even try to learn because they're so scared of they're so scared of doing it wrong or just, being painted as the ignorant one. Do you see that too?
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And like I feel like especially in a very online space, I feel like there's this like very big stress to like accidentally say the wrong thing, especially with like cancel culture and all of that. And so I feel like there's a lot of times where like people are very afraid to say something like in case like they get something wrong, or like people like to go in and like pick things apart, and like don't give the opportunity to learn and be like, oh yeah, like I didn't have this perspective, let me do more research, like let me make sure that I'm not saying something incorrect and harming a community. And I think in a very big online space, especially when people have presence, like it's very impactful for them to actually speak up about things, but terrifying because if it gets into like if they accidentally say something wrong because they don't know enough about it, then there's a possibility for people to just like completely lose everything that they've been building, even if they are very open to learning and like not realizing,
Mm-hmm. I also, I think you hit on a good point. Like, there is a pressure to always speak. And I actually don't think that that's, like, I think that there is something impactful to speaking, but I actually don't know if, like, it always has to be there. Like, is the answer always to make a statement, or is sometimes the better answer to just retweet, and listen and donate, I think that there is such a pressure for folks to constantly have an opinion on a situation or make a statement on a situation. And from my own perspective, like, one, I deal with this like fear of speaking, not just like, sometimes I deal with the fear of speaking on things I know a lot about, but I'm still scared of speaking. But like,
that's fair.
But on one level it's that, but on the other level it's like, I'd actually rather, like, yes, I know people see me as somebody who should have an opinion on things and spread it, but sometimes I'd rather just uplift other voices or listen myself and learn myself and donate, and I think that I think that that's okay and it's valid. And I think that this pressure to constantly have an opinion on things and have a take on things and be the one speaking can hurt us a little bit as like a conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, no, absolutely. Especially like in light of all the recent events that's been going on. Like, I think it's very important to remember that people don't have to like there's a very big difference in like seeing things that are going on and caring, and then like wanting to protect your mental health with everything going on, right? And so like retweeting something could like really be like harmful to you, right? And like sometimes you want to disconnect from everything that's going on, but that doesn't mean like that a person doesn't care, and I feel like we see that a lot, especially on Twitter, where like people are silent about things because they might be taking everything in, they might be like internalizing it and like listening to everything that's going on and just be stressed and not in a good place, and not wanting to like continually like retweet things over and over because people have probably seen it on their timeline 70 times and they don't need to be re-traumatized. And so I think that it is really important knowing like especially on the point that you are making, like knowing that it is sometimes better to just retweet things instead of stating it in your own terms, especially if someone said it in a really good way, like especially if you can't really add to the conversation, especially if it's like people in those communities that would benefit a lot more from being retweeted or quote tweeted. That way people can like go into their like communities and learn more specifically from that person who actually has the knowledge and the depth and the breadth to actually talk about all that kind of stuff that you don't.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a tricky balance, you know, because it's
Mm-hmm.
sort of like the role of an ally to speak up
Mm-hmm.
when it to preserve the emotional labor of those affected, right? Sometimes, but
Mm-hmm.
also to listen and sit back. And so I understand that like that fear and that, you know, anxiety of not knowing quite what to do, which is why I so appreciate spaces that are vocal about what they want from allies. Do you feel that way
Mm-hmm.
too? Like I feel
Yeah.
like whenever, like as an, you know, and in any situation where I am an ally, I love being told like here's some ways you can help, because then there's no
Yeah.
question in my mind. I don't have the
Yes.
ability to like, I don't have to overthink it. I don't have to worry. I just do it what I've been asked to do.
Yep. Yep.
Which, like, you know, listen, like that's not always going to happen, but I think it's, for me it's nice, and I try to do that. I try to do that and sort of like for my own community be like, here's what you can do, you know,
Hmm. Yeah.
just to sort of help a little.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely
um
also really appreciate those because, like, sometimes, like, you don't know what you're supposed, like, because your brain is just like, oh God, what do I do now? So, like, having, like, I've seen a lot of, like, posts of, like, hey, like, these are some petitions you can sign to help out. Like, here are some people you could, like, support. And I'm just like, yes, give me that whole thread because now I know what to do.
exactly, and then I know how to spread it to my own
Yeah.
community, you know. I
Yep.
think that that's such a good point. um yeah, it's a, I think that's a great point too, Umi, is like knowing when to
Yeah.
disconnect, and prioritizing yourself. I mean, talk about intersectional identities. Like a lot of us are dealing with our own stuff, you know, and like we might not always be able to just like drop everything and have the emotional bandwidth to like do everything. And disconnecting is completely okay in that scenario. Retweeting is okay, whatever it is that you need to do. Maybe that leads us to what, maybe one last good question for the day. And I don't know, this is not a question I like prepped with you, so if you don't want to ask, if you don't want to answer it, tell me. But like, do you have any thoughts on like boundaries and self-care as a leader of a safe community? Like, is there anything that you do for yourself or have found that works, that, you know, protects your energy? Maybe not even just as like a leader of a community, but also just like as a person existing in this world, you know?
Yeah. Oh, that's a difficult one because I'm still learning. I feel like I've always been really bad at the entire boundaries thing for myself. Like I'm really bad at being like, hey, like this is where I need to cut off. Like this is where I cannot talk about the thing because it's too much for me. I feel like I'm still constantly learning how best to navigate those conversations and be comfortable in telling people. Um, but I think one thing that I tend to do is like, I know that like I've got a lot of pals who like to game, um, and so there are some times where my brain just really needs to be by itself in a game and not like a cooperative kind of thing on voice calls or things like that. Because like even if it's a co-op game like Dead by Daylight or something, sometimes like I've got a boundary to where like I am just not able to be vocal at that exact moment, and like putting everything on invisible, like literally just putting everything, my Steam, my Discord, like everything to invisible slash mute or whatever, like to make sure that people don't get ping notifications that like, hey, like Kofi's online playing Dead by Daylight, like maybe I can reach out to them, like being able to just like shut all that down and be like, all right, this is just gonna be me dying in Dead by Daylight by myself, let's go, you know.
I love that. That was actually something I had to figure out myself too. I never actually went as far as to make myself invisible. That's a really good idea. So really,
I'm just too
I might be,
passive to
I
say
might be
anything.
in your DMs later, like, how do I do that?
I got you.
But like, I used to feel like if I was logging on to play, I should play with one of the many people who have been wanting to hang out
Mm.
with me, because I constantly feel like I'm failing people in that regard. Like
Oh
I'm
yeah.
not like I don't always have the social energy to like actually hang out with anyone other than myself and my cats.
Yeah.
And I harbor guilt about it. So I used to like log on to like vibe in a game and feel like I should probably be playing with this other person who I know would probably really like to play with me. And then one day I just sort of like a switch. I was just like, I'm not going to do that. I'm just going to enjoy this game, even
Um,
if it's a co-op game by myself, even if I'd be more effective if I played with
yeah.
somebody else.
Oh
um,
my god.
so yeah, I share that one with you. Another big one for me has been trying to recognize when the digital space is becoming too loud. Like,
Mm.
when do I need to turn Twitter off? When do I need to sign off of Twitch? As much as I want to support my friends, sometimes I need to sign off of Twitch. And sometimes I need to like just not be online and let myself figure out like, where is my voice in this,
Mhm.
because a lot of times I'll spend time scrolling and listening and hearing, and I'll lose my own perspective and my own voice in it, and I need time away.
Yeah. Oh, that
um,
is a mood. Yeah, like I definitely feel that on a very deep level because like I feel like I always have a really difficult like internal battle between like I'm just ridiculously busy and so I don't have spoons or time like ever. And I feel like for the longest time I always felt so bad when I could like quote unquote only pop a lurk and like not actively engage in someone's chat, you know? And it's taken me a really long time to realize that hey, you can just lurk and not say anything and not feel bad about it, you know?
yeah, I think you recently said something along the lines of like sometimes feeling like you need to prove your friendship in certain
Oh,
ways. And I feel that on a fundamental level.
yeah.
Like, sometimes like that push to be like, let me, be super generous so that so that I
Yeah.
care, or like hang out in your stream so that I care. And I try so hard to dial that back. Because it's
Yeah.
not rooted in anything real. It's rooted in my own insecurities about being a good friend.
Yeah.
And we can't be everywhere. We are busy. You stretch yourself thin already, putting so much of your time into, you do the streaming, the resource group, your actual job. You've got so much. So I think, being able to prioritize yourself and unplug is one of the best things we can do. I don't ever tell people I'm lurking. I started doing that too.
Yeah.
Because I don't know about you, but I find when I go in and I say I'm lurking is when they start asking me questions.
Yes.
And I'm like,
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
I'm excited to see you too, but I'm not here right now.
Yeah, I always feel so bad because I definitely like when I love when people have like the hey, I'm lurking like quiet lurk kind of like channel redeem because then I can just like pop it on and just like pop out. But I always feel so bad when people are like, "Oh, like hi Tofi, like hi, have a great lurk. I hope you're having a great day." Because I'm just like I feel like the incessive need to be like thank you to everyone because I'm just like, well, now I've got to sit here for 10 minutes and say thank you to everyone and make sure I didn't miss the streamer saying something to me and making like and it's a time my
And
brain just like goes
I'm guilty of it. Cause like I probably have done it too. I just get excited to see people. So
yeah.
I'll be like, I hope you're doing so well. And like, and
Yes.
so like I understand it on a fundamental level, but at the same time I'm like, I don't have the energy for this. So I'm just gonna be lurking in the background and not announce
Yes.
myself.
Absolutely.
And it's taken me a while to be okay with that, but I've gotten to a good place now. And I think it's an important thing for people to reflect on. Is like how much of your friendship is you posturing at friendship, and how much of it is like, just like how are you taking care of yourself too?
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure.
Well, Tofi, thank you for this incredible conversation. It flew by. I can't believe it's already been 2 hours of chats,
Oh
but
my gosh. Yeah.
I had such a great time chatting with you about all of the things. You are 100% somebody that I am constantly, endlessly inspired by, and it is a joy to be your friend. And I won't posture at it. I will just, and if I ever see you logging on to play a game, like when you log on to Genshin, I will ignore you. But if you see me on and you want to just like come over and steal my flowers or something, you can just come. I'll ignore you. We'll both ignore each other. It'll be fine.
Oh my god, thank you. I'll just, in addition to stealing your flowers, I will like play something on the lute or whatever it is.
Oh my gosh,
Maybe Shrek, maybe
please.
not.
Please. I had such a great time chatting. Thank you so much for today. And everybody in the chat, thank you for the exquisite Saturday vibes, the wonderful questions. It was, I don't know, this conversation filled my cup for sure. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Are we doing a raid at all, Sulky? Is there anybody on to raid? I don't know.
Yeah, and this was really lovely. Thank you so much.
Oh, we are. We're doing a raid for Cater Tot. Awesome.
Ooh.
Yeah, go ahead, Tofi.
No, just gonna say thank you. This was an honor, and I'm just really glad to know you. So yeah.
I'm so glad to know you. Everybody, please go check out the swamp. You will not regret it. Let's actually get your Twitch in here. There you go. Go ahead and give Tofi a follow. If you wanted to head on over to MySpace, you can also, I think I have a command. Maybe if Stream Elements is working. But I appreciate you all so much for hanging out today. And I'll be back actually on this channel in just a couple weeks. I think we're gonna play some Stardew. So I'll see you all soon. Let's go give some love to Cater Tot. Thank you for everything today. And thank you, Tofi. Enjoy the rest of your day. Get some more tea. Bye-bye, everybody. Take care.